This is lecture number 2, also known as the paradigm of Module 1, The Writer Prepares. If you have not done so already, please download the lecture notes that I have prepared for you as part of this course. It is important to remember that preparation is the key to building a solid foundation for the screenplay that you will ultimately write. Now, I have used this same process in all of my screenplays, and if you're not careful, impatience might tempt you to circumvent the process and create shortcuts. Don't do it. We left our last lecture discussing the fact that the screenplay is really all about structure. And Sidfield's story paradigm will help us illustrate structure in a very visual way. The structure of a story, the relationship between the parts and the whole, is called its paradigm. Now, if you wanted to take a screenplay and hang it on a wall like a painting in some sort of graphic format, the paradigm is what it would look like. Here's what a traditional story paradigm will look like from page 1 to page 120. All stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. The great philosopher and playwright Aristotle defined the 3 unities of dramatic action: time, place, and activity. The screenplay delineates all 3 of these in approximately 100 to 120 pages. Why so specific? Well, first it has to do with budget. See, back in the day when the studios controlled the making of all motion pictures, studio executives basically would calculate a cost per page. The fewer the pages of the script ostensibly meant budget control. A second reason is American audiences typically have a problem tolerating longer films. 1 page of a script typically is calculated to be 1 minute of film. So 120 pages is roughly a 2-hour movie. Now there are exceptions, one of which is The Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. That script was only 118 pages long, but the film itself is over 3 hours, over 180 minutes. That's because director Peter Jackson did not require a lot of description in that script because he had it all in his head. So the script was barely 118 pages, but the film itself was over 180 minutes long. So now let's chart out a script in terms of your story paradigm. Act 1, or the beginning of your script, is a unit of dramatic action that is approximately 30 pages long and is held together with the dramatic context known as the setup. We will discuss context versus content in just a bit. But in Act 1, we establish our characters. We launch our dramatic premise, which is what the story is about. We illustrate the situation or describe circumstances surrounding the action, and we create the relationship between our characters. All of these things occur in the setup, or Act 1. Act 2, on the other hand, spans approximately 60 pages, and it follows Act 1 beginning at page about 29, and it lasts until Act 3, or about page 90. And it is held together in a dramatic context known as the conflict. During the conflict, the main character encounters obstacle after obstacle that keeps them from fulfilling their dramatic need. A dramatic need is what your main character wants to win, or gain, or get, or achieve during the course of the script. If you know your main character's dramatic need, then you can create or write obstacles against that need. An example of this is in The Fugitive. Harrison Ford's dramatic need is to prove his innocence. So all of his actions during the course of the conflict reflect that emotion or that need. All drama is conflict. Make a note of that. All drama is conflict. And without conflict, you have no action. Without action, you have no character, because character is action. Without character, you have no story. And without a story, guys, you have no screenplay. I'll say that again. All drama is conflict. Without conflict, you have no action. Without action, you have no character. Without characters, you have no story. And without story, you have no screenplay. Act 3 is the end of the screenplay. It is the unit of dramatic action that is approximately 30 pages long, beginning at the end of Act 2 or around page 89, and is held together in the dramatic context known as the resolution. Now there's an important distinction here. The resolution does not mean the end. Rather, it means the solution. The solution to what? The solution to the conflict that we just encountered with our main character over the conflict, or the last 60 pages or so. The resolution is the course of whether your main character finally does or does not achieve their dramatic need. Structurally speaking, the real end of the screenplay is the last page. Simple, not the resolution. So the basic structure of our screenplay is going to be the setup, the conflict, and the resolution. Now that we have our beginning, middle, and our end, how do we seamlessly traverse these three distinct contexts? The answer is that we create plot points at the ends of Acts 1 and 2. A plot point is defined as any incident, episode, or event that hooks into the action and spins the story around into another direction. Plot points must always involve the main character. An example would be in The Lord of the Rings. The plot point at the end of Act 1 is when Frodo and Sam leave the Shire to go get rid of the ring. All of the screenplay to that point is merely an introduction. But at that point, Sam and Frodo leave the comfort of the Shire to go on an errand of great importance. While there is a correct screenplay format, which we will discuss in Module 2, there is no single right way to write a screenplay. Before we continue discussing Sid Field's paradigm, let me say, as I said in Lecture 1, there are several theories for writing a screenplay, and each of them has their own unique structure because, well, after all, screenplay is structure. Here are some of the more popular theories. The three-act structure is the most widely used structure, originating with playwright Aristotle, and it's similar to the approach that we are using in this course, but it consists of 3 acts, including a setup, a confrontation, and a resolution. The Sid Field paradigm is different from the typical 3-act structure in that it uses plot points to transition between the acts, and also focuses on a midpoint to break up the second act, which can become notoriously boring in a traditional 3-act structure. The hero's journey, also known as the monomyth, was formulated by mythologist Joseph Campbell in the 1940s. Campbell's insight was that important myths from around the world have survived for thousands of years, and they all share a fundamental structure. His structure includes 5 phases, and you can learn more by reading Christopher Vogler's book, The Writer's Journey, Mythic Structure for Writers, 1993. The sequence approach, sometimes known as the 8-sequence structure, is a system developed by Frank Daniel. In the early years of film reels could only hold about 10 minutes of celluloid or film, so that created a sequence-based storytelling. In the sequence approach, each sequence has a mini 3-act structure whose resolution leads into the setup of the next sequence. Complicated, huh? Then we have a nonlinear narrative. The nonlinear narrative is one that does not proceed in a straight line, where the screenwriter creates a story ending before the middle is finished. A perfect example of a nonlinear narrative is the 1994 Quentin Tarantino film Pulp Fiction. There are plenty of resources out there in book form or on the internet about all 5 of these theories, but for our purposes, this workshop will focus on the Sid Field paradigm. Bobcat Goldthwait, who you may remember from the Police Academy movies, well, he writes and directs modest-sized films. And in his process, he checks into a hotel room and writes a script in 30 days, start to finish. He uses that 30 days in a hotel room as a financial barrier to help him finish the work of writing the script in 30 days. He starts off with a blank piece of paper and starts on page 1 and writes the whole thing straight through. And there are many other stories like Rocky and Raiders of the Lost Ark that were supposedly written in this manner. One stream of consciousness, right? Now, I personally have a copy of the Raiders of the Lost Ark script, and having read it, I can tell you that it may have in fact been written in one stream of consciousness, but it was definitely edited in a 3-act paradigm. So in writing your screenplay, there is both an art and a craft. The craft of writing the screenplay is going to be our focus in this particular module, and it is found in the method of going from one single sentence to 100 to 120 pages. And by the way, this is the method that I use when I write my screenplays. The craft of the screenplay is how you go about building the structure of your screenplay. The art of the screenplay is how you write things like dialogue or how you use metaphor to tell your story. The craft that I use, that I will share with you through this workshop, is certainly a step-by-step process. Each step helps create a natural structure and will bring you closer to the completed story. And that story you will ultimately transcribe into the blueprint known as the first draft of your screenplay. Are you getting excited yet? Again, I know it's taking a little time to get into the mechanics of actually writing, but I promise you, all of this preparation is extremely important. You'll see. Hang in there. The best is yet to come. You're doing great. That ends my lecture on the story paradigm. A paradigm is a professional tool that you will continue to use to help you with the structure of your screenplay throughout your career. Now I invite you to join us for our next lecture, which will be the development of character and story simultaneously.